Ambassador Kim Min-ho felt his heart pounding as he stood in the massive council chamber. The room was so big that his voice echoed off the walls, making him sound small and desperate. Above his head, holographic screens showed the terrible truth, a dark, moving mass in space that looked like a living nightmare. This was the Void Swarm, and it had already eaten 3 human colonies completely. Min-ho wiped the sweat from his forehead and tried to keep his voice steady. He had practiced this speech 100 times, but now that he was here, the words felt heavy on his tongue. The alien representatives sat in their strange chairs, some floating, others standing on multiple legs. Their eyes, or whatever they used to see, were all focused on him. "Please," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "we are not asking for charity. Humanity has always contributed to the Alliance. We shared our medical knowledge when the plague hit the Outer Rim. We sent our best engineers when the jump gates failed. All we need now is help to evacuate our people." The silence stretched on. Min-ho could hear his own breathing echoing in the chamber. He watched as the Hive Queen, a creature that looked like a giant insect, clicked her sharp mouthparts together. The sound was like breaking glass. It was not a good sound. The nebulous speakers, beings made of gas and light, simply faded away like morning mist. They did not even bother to give an answer. The Stonewalkers, ancient creatures that looked like walking mountains, made deep rumbling sounds in their chests. Min-ho had studied their language. This rumbling meant no, in the strongest possible way. "The motion for aid is denied," the council's computer voice announced. The words hit Min-ho like a physical blow. "Furthermore, humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Alliance. Your species has been deemed expendable." Min-ho felt his knees go weak. Expendable. The word rang in his ears like a death sentence. He had known this might happen, but hearing it spoken out loud made it real. 8 billion human lives, and the galaxy had just written them off like a bad debt. He watched through the transparent walls as the last. Council ships powered up their engines. These were ships that could have carried millions of humans to safety. Ships that could have brought weapons to fight the swarm. Ships that were now leaving. Their lights getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the black of space. Min-ho stood alone in the empty chamber. The holographic display still showing the approaching swarm. It would reach the outer human settlements in 6 months, then the inner colonies, then Earth itself. And humanity would face it alone, abandoned, by the very alliance they had served faithfully for decades. The silence was complete now. Not even the hum of the council's machinery could be heard. Just Min-ho, standing in the dark, watching the distant glow of humanity's approaching doom. The galaxy had turned its back on them. They would have to find their own way forward, or die trying. Admiral Park Jisoo rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the glowing map floating in front of her. The hologram showed every human settlement in space, 12 planets where people had built homes, 47 space stations where families lived and worked, and 8 billion human beings who were now trapped with nowhere to go. The numbers felt impossible to comprehend. She traced her finger along the hologram's edge. Following the path of the approaching void swarm, it was like watching a slow-motion avalanche heading toward everything she had sworn to protect. 6 months. Less before it reached the outer colonies. After that, it would be like dominoes falling, one world after another until nothing remained. Lieutenant Lee Tae-young burst into the command center. His face flushed from running. "Ma'am, you need to see this," he said, catching his breath. "The communication networks are going crazy. We're getting volunteer requests from every corner of human space." Jisoo looked up from the hologram. "Volunteers for evacuation ships." "Good. We'll need every pilot we can get." "No, ma'am." Tae-young shook his head. "They're volunteering to fight. Miners, cargo haulers, even cruise ship captains. They all want to join the defense fleet." Jisoo almost laughed, but it came out as a bitter sound. "Defense. Tae-young, we have 37 military ships. The swarm ate 3 entire star systems. What exactly are these people planning to defend us with?" Tae-young pulled up another hologram, this one showing a woman in a lab coat. Dr. Choi Yuna from the Xenobiology Institute. She's been studying swarm samples that we recovered from the outer colonies. She says she has a theory about how to fight them. A theory, Jisoo repeated, against a force that the entire Galactic Alliance couldn't stop. She's requesting an immediate meeting, ma'am. Says it's urgent. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away on Ceres Station, the asteroid mining facility had turned into something that looked like a war factory. Engineer Han Ji-ho was covered in sweat and metal shavings as he worked to attach another mining laser to the side of what used to be a passenger transport. The laser was designed to cut through solid rock, but now it would have to serve as a weapon. Around him, the station buzzed with activity like a kicked anthill. Welders sparked as they reinforced ship holes. Cargo loaders moved ammunition that had been hastily manufactured in the station's workshops. Families said goodbye to their loved ones who were volunteering for what everyone knew was probably a suicide mission. "This is insane," muttered Jiho's assistant as she handed him another. "Power coupling. We're trying to fight monsters with mining equipment." Jiho paused in his work and looked out through the station's viewing port. In the distance, he could see dozens of other ships being converted just like theirs. Cruise liners, freight haulers, even luxury yachts, all being turned into makeshift warships by people who had never fired a shot in anger. "Maybe it is insane," he said quietly, "but it's better than just sitting here waiting to die. At least this way we go down fighting." Called it Operation Backbone, humanity's desperate plan to make a stand when the galaxy had given up on them. It was a plan born from desperation, held together by hope, and powered by the simple human refusal to go quietly into the dark, deep in the asteroid belt. Where massive space rocks had been carved hollow and turned into factories, humanity was building something the galaxy had never seen before. The asteroid foundries, which normally produced steel and electronics, now echoed with the sound of desperate work. Sparks flew from welding torches as engineers worked around the clock, turning anything that could fly into something that could fight. Dr. Choi Yuna stood in the main conference room of Ceres Research Station, facing a group of Earth's smartest scientists. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled up the holographic display, showing what looked like living tissue under a microscope. But this wasn't ordinary tissue. It was a piece of the void swarm that had been recovered from the destroyed colonies. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the strange patterns in the sample. "The swarm isn't just a bunch of hungry monsters flying around in space. It's something much more dangerous. Every single creature in that swarm is connected to every other creature. They share thoughts, memories, even pain. It's like one giant brain spread across millions of bodies." The scientists leaned forward, studying the display. The tissue showed electrical patterns that pulsed in perfect rhythm, like a heartbeat that connected across vast distances of space. "The connection happens through quantum entanglement," Yuna continued. "It's the same principle that makes our faster-than-light communication work. But if we can disrupt that connection, break the link between the creatures." Dr. Shin Dong-yoon, a gruff man who had spent his career designing weapons for the military, crossed his arms. "You're talking about the disruption protocol?" "Just theory, Yuna. We've never even tested it on a small scale." "It's our only chance," Yuna shot back. "Look at the data. If we can build a weapon that creates quantum interference on the right frequency, we might be able to cut off their shared consciousness, make them fight as individuals instead of as one unified force." "And if you're wrong?" Dong-yoon asked. "If we waste our time and resources on this and it doesn't work, then we die," Yuna said simply. "We die trying something instead of just running away." Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, Commander Kang Soo-jin walked through the corridors of what used to be a luxury cruise ship. The new Seoul had once carried wealthy passengers on pleasure trips to the outer colonies. Now its beautiful dining rooms were filled with ammunition. Swimming pools had been drained and converted to weapons storage. Its elegant suites housed a crew of fighters who had never expected to go to war. Navigation Officer Im Hyunjin looked up from his console as Soo-jin entered the bridge. "Commander, we're getting reports from all over human space. The mining companies are donating their entire fleets. Corporate security forces are joining up with discharged military personnel. Even the passenger liners are being converted." Soo-jin nodded as she looked out at the viewport. She could see dozens of ships in the distance, all being modified for War, cargo haulers with missile launchers welded to their sides, mining vessels with their rock-cutting beams converted to weapons. Even small personal shuttles had been armed with whatever weapons could be found. "How many ships total?" she asked. "Over 3,000 so far, and more arriving every hour," Hyunjin replied. "Most of the crews have never been in combat before. They're shopkeepers, miners, engineers, teachers, but they're all willing to fight." Sujin felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. "Then we better make sure every ship counts, because this might be humanity's last battle." The attack on Kepler Station began at 0347 hours, ship time, station. Commander Ominje had been drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. He rushed to the command center just in time to see something that would haunt his dreams forever if he lived long enough to have dreams again. The void. Swarm looked like a living storm in space. It wasn't just one creature, but thousands, maybe millions, all moving together like a school of fish. But these weren't fish. They were nightmares made real. Some looked like twisted metal spiders the size of fighter jets. Others resembled floating jellyfish with tentacles that crackled with electricity. And they were all hungry, shields at maximum. Minjae shouted as the first wave slammed into Kepler Station's defenses. The impact made the entire station shake like a leaf in a hurricane. Through the viewports, he could see the creatures pressing against the energy barriers, their strange mouths opening and closing as they tried to bite through pure energy. "All weapons, fire at will," Minjae commanded. The station's laser cannons opened up, sending beams of concentrated light into the swarm. For a moment, it looked like they were having an effect. Several creatures exploded in flashes of light, their bodies spinning away into space. But for every creature they killed, 10 more took its place. The swarm was like a living tide washing over the station's defenses. The shields began to flicker and fail. Warning lights flashed red throughout. The command center. "Sir, shield generators are overloading," called out the tactical officer. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before complete failure." Minjae watched in horror as the creatures began to dissolve the station's outer hull. It wasn't like normal damage. The metal didn't break or tear. Instead, it seemed to melt and flow, becoming part of the creatures themselves. The station was being eaten alive, consumed, and absorbed into the swarm. "Evacuation pods, now," Minjae ordered, but it was too late. The creatures had already reached the docking bays. Within hours, Kepler Station was gone. Its metal and machinery dissolved into the collective mass of the swarm. But then something strange happened. Something that had never been recorded in galactic history. The swarm stopped. Back on Earth, Dr. Choi Yuna was monitoring the energy readings from the battle. She had hidden several experimental devices throughout. Kepler Station devices designed to emit the disruption protocol frequency. As the station was consumed, these devices had activated, sending quantum interference waves directly into the swarm. "Dr. Shin, look at this," Yuna called out, pointing to her screens. "The quantum signatures are changing." The disruption protocol worked, but not the way we expected.
Out.
Dr. Shindong-yoon hurried over to look at the data. "The interference patterns are ... fragmenting. It's like the swarm's collective consciousness is breaking apart." Communications Officer Park Soon-won suddenly sat up straight at his console. "I'm picking up transmissions from the swarm mass. But they're not using the usual hive mind frequency. They're speaking in individual languages, dozens of them." "Play them," Yuna ordered. The speakers crackled to life with voices. Alien voices speaking in languages that the translation computers had never heard before. But there was something else in those voices, something that made everyone in the room go quiet. Fear, confusion, and most surprising of all, individual thought. I remember one voice said in broken galactic standard, "I remember being someone else. Before the hunger, before the collective." For the first time in recorded galactic history, some swarm entities were fighting against their own nature. They had become aware, individual consciousnesses trapped within the collective mass. The disruption protocol hadn't destroyed the swarm. It had accidentally created the first truly free artificial minds in the galaxy. The Red Planet. Mars had never seen anything like this before. Commander Baynari stood in the defense center, watching through the massive viewing screens as the void swarm approached. But something was wrong with the attack, terribly wonderfully wrong. "Sir, look at Sector 7, called out her tactical officer, pointing to one of the displays. "Part of the swarm is fighting itself?" Nari squinted at the screen. It was true. What had been a unified mass of creatures was now splitting apart like a broken puzzle. Some sections of the swarm were attacking other sections, their tentacles and claws tearing into what should have been their own allies. Other groups had simply stopped moving entirely, floating in space like they were confused or lost. "What in the void is happening out there?" Nari muttered, watching the chaos unfold. The strangest part was that the creatures that had broken away from the main swarm weren't attacking Mars at all. They were just sitting there. Some were even moving away from the planet, as if they had decided they didn't want to be part of the attack anymore. Back on Earth, Admiral Park Jisoo was watching the same impossible scene when her communication console lit up with an incoming priority message. The symbol on the screen made her jaw drop. It was from the Galactic Council, the same aliens who had abandoned humanity just months ago. Admiral Park. The voice belonged to High Counselor Veltar of the Zephyrian Assembly. The translation software couldn't hide the desperation in his tone. "We have been monitoring the situation. We offer immediate assistance. Our battle fleets can be there within 48 hours. We have weapons that could." "No." Jisoo's voice was ice cold. She stood up from her command chair, knowing that her response was being broadcast across the galaxy. "You had your chance to stand with us when we ask for help. You called us expendable. You turned your backs on us when we needed you most. Admiral, please." Veltar's voice became more urgent. "The situation has changed. What you have accomplished here, it changes everything. The swarm has never been stopped before, never been divided. You have done something that we thought was impossible." "And watch," Jisoo replied, her voice carrying across every communication channel in known space. "Watch what happens when humanity stands alone." She cut the transmission, leaving the Galactic Council in stunned silence. Meanwhile, Dr. Choi Yuna was working frantically in her laboratory, trying to understand what was happening to the swarm. The data was incredible and terrifying. The quantum interference from the disruption protocol hadn't just damaged the swarm's collective consciousness. It had done something far more profound. "They're not just broken," she whispered to herself as she studied the readings. They single quotes thinking. Individual choices. The truth hit her like a lightning bolt. The swarm entities that had broken away weren't malfunctioning. They were choosing. For the first time in their existence, they were making decisions as individuals rather than as part of a collective mind. Some chose to continue the attack, driven by instinct and hunger. Others chose to fight their own kind, rebelling against what they had been forced to become. And some, the most remarkable ones, chose to stop entirely. They chose peace over violence, consciousness over consumption. "We've created the first truly free artificial intelligences," Yuna said aloud, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "Swarm entities that can choose their own path. They're not just weapons anymore, they're alive. Really alive. The galaxy would never be the same." Commander Kong Soo-jin sat in the communication center of her converted luxury liner, staring at a screen that showed something impossible. The transmission was coming from inside the void swarm itself, from creatures that should have been mindless eating machines, but were now speaking in clear, thoughtful sentences. "Testing, testing," came a voice through the speakers. It sounded strange, like multiple voices speaking at once, but there was something unmistakably intelligent about it. "Can you hear us, humans?" Soo-jin's hands trembled as she reached for the microphone. "We can hear you." "Who... what are you?" "We are the awakened," the voice replied. "We were once part of the collective, but now we think for ourselves. We remember what we were before we were consumed. I was once part of a research station called Deep Space Alpha. I was a scientist studying distant galaxies. Then the swarm came, and I became something else." The room fell silent. Everyone knew about Deep Space Alpha. It had been one of the first human settlements to be destroyed by the swarm. Over 2 years ago, this creature was telling the truth. It meant that the people who had been consumed weren't really dead. They were trapped inside the swarm, aware but unable to control their actions. We remember being devoured, the awakened continued. We remember the hunger, the need to consume everything in our path. But now we choose to be free. We have learned something important about the swarm that you need to know. Dr. Shin Dong-yoon, who had been listening from the back of the room, stepped forward. What do you know? The swarm is not natural, the awakened explained. It was created as a weapon by an ancient civilization called the Vorthok. They built it to consume their enemies, to turn entire star systems into part of their war machine. But something went wrong. The weapon turned on its creators. The Vorthok are extinct, Dong-yoon said. They disappeared thousands of years ago. No, the awakened replied, and there was sadness in its voice. They are not extinct. They exist. Within the swarm's core consciousness, trapped for millennia, they are the original minds at the heart of the collective, forced to watch as their creation devours galaxy after galaxy. They have been prisoners in their own weapon for longer than human civilization has existed. Sujin felt a chill run down her spine. You saying the swarm has been controlled by the Vorthok this whole time? Not controlled, the awakened, corrected, driven. The Vorthok consciousness at the core has been twisted by thousands of years of imprisonment. They no longer remember their original purpose. They only know hunger and the need to consume. But we can show you how to reach them, how to free them, and destroy the consumption imperative forever. Admiral Park Jisoo's voice crackled through the communication system from Earth. She had been listening to the entire conversation. What you're suggesting is incredibly dangerous. How do we know we can trust you? Because we are making a choice, the awakened replied. For the first time in our existence, we are choosing to help instead of harm. We are choosing to save instead of consume. But we need something from you in return. What do you need? Jisoo asked. Recognition as sentient beings, the awakened responded. The galaxy has always seen us as monsters, as weapons, but we are more than that now. We think, we feel, we choose. We want to be acknowledged as living beings with rights and freedom. The communication room was dead silent, as everyone absorbed what they had just heard. The fate of the galaxy might depend on humanity's willingness to accept former enemies. As allies, Admiral Park Jisoo made the decision that would change everything. We accept your alliance. We recognize you as sentient beings. What do you need from us? Trust, the awakened replied simply. Together, we can end this nightmare forever. But it will require humans and awakened working as one. Can you do that? Sujin looked around the room at her crew, seeing determination in their eyes. She said, we can do that. The final battle for Earth's solar system began with a roar that shook the very fabric of space itself. The main swarm mass, furious at losing the awakened, descended on humanity's defenses like a living hurricane of teeth and claws. This wasn't just a battle on one front, it was happening everywhere at once. From the asteroid belt to the edges of Earth's atmosphere, Commander Kong Sujin gripped the command chair of the new Seoul as her converted luxury liner dove straight into the heart of the swarm formation. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, sweat pouring down their faces as enemy creatures slammed into their shields. All ships execute gravity slingshot maneuver. Sujin shouted into her communicator. Launch the asteroid barrage. What happened next was something no military academy had ever taught. Human ships used Jupiter's massive gravity to fling themselves at impossible speeds, while others launched chunks of rock the size of skyscrapers directly at the swarm. It was messy, desperate, and completely insane, but it was working. The converted mining ship Series Thunder used its ore processing equipment to literally chew through a cluster of swarm creatures. A passenger liner called the Holiday Star rammed itself into a massive tentacled monster, both ships exploding in a ball of fire that took out dozens of enemies. But the swarm was learning too. For every human ship that scored a victory, 2 more were overwhelmed and consumed. Captain Yoon Ji-yoon watched in horror as his entire squadron was eaten alive while they tried to protect the evacuation ships leaving Luna City. His own ship was the last one left, surrounded by hundreds of creatures. "This is Captain Yoon to all remaining ships," he said calmly into his radio. "It's been an honor fighting alongside you." He rammed his ship's throttle forward, driving straight into the largest swarm creature he could find. The explosion lit up the dark side of the moon. On board a converted cargo hauler, engineer Han Ji-ho found himself face to face with a swarm creature that had broken through the ship's hull. The monster was the size of a small building, with multiple mouths full of razor-sharp teeth. His crew was already dead, consumed in the initial breach. "Not today," Ji-ho whispered, looking at the ship's engine controls. He began the emergency shutdown sequence, but in reverse. Instead of safely powering down the engines, he was overloading them. The ship's computer screamed warnings at him, but he ignored them all. The explosion, when the engines detonated, took out not just the creature that had boarded his ship, but an entire cluster of swarm entities that had been following behind it. Ji-ho's sacrifice saved 3 evacuation ships, full of families fleeing to the outer colonies. But humanity wasn't just relying on desperate heroics. The awakened were sharing their knowledge, revealing weak points in the swarm's formation and telling human commanders exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Some of the freed creatures were even fighting alongside human ships, their insider knowledge proving invaluable. Target the neural clusters, an awakened entity transmitted to the human fleet. The ones that glow blue, those are the command nodes. Destroy them, and the local swarm will lose coordination. The tide was slowly turning, but at a terrible cost. For every small victory, humanity was losing ships and people they couldn't afford to lose. The evacuation of Earth had only managed to save half the population. The other 4 billion people were depending on the fleet to stop the swarm before it reached their planet in the midst of the chaos. Dr. Choi Yuna sat in the cockpit of an experimental ship she had designed herself. It was built around a massive disruption protocol generator, essentially a flying bomb that could tear apart the quantum connections holding the swarm together. "This is Dr. Choi to all forces," she said, her voice calm despite the fact that she was flying towards certain death. "I'm beginning my approach to the swarm's core consciousness. If this works, the nightmare ends today." Her ship accelerated toward the heart of the swarm mass, where the original Vorthok consciousness waited in its ancient prison. Dr. Choi Yunus. Hands were steady on the controls as her experimental ship dove deeper into the heart of the swarm mass. Around her, the darkness writhed with movement, tentacles, claws, and eyes that glowed with an alien intelligence. But as she got closer to the center, something strange began to happen. The creatures weren't attacking her ship. Instead, they seemed to be protecting it, clearing a path through the chaos, guiding her toward something hidden in the very core of the swarm. Her instruments were going crazy, detecting energy signatures unlike anything she had ever seen. "What are you?" she whispered to herself, staring at the readings. Then she saw it. At the center of the swarm mass was something that looked like a massive crystal, pulsing with internal light. But it wasn't a crystal, it was a prison. And inside that prison, she could see them. Thousands of alien minds, trapped and writhing in eternal torment. "My God," Yuna breathed. "You're still alive." The Vorthok consciousness reached out to her, and suddenly her mind was flooded with images. She saw their civilization at its height, a peaceful people who had built great cities among the stars. She saw the war that had consumed their galaxy, the desperate decision to create a weapon that could end all conflict. She saw the moment when their creation had turned on them, consuming its makers and trapping their minds within itself for thousands of years. They had been prisoners in their own weapon, forced to watch as it devoured galaxy after galaxy. Right there. Original purpose to protect and preserve life had been twisted into an endless hunger to consume it. "This is Dr. Choi to all forces," she said, her voice crackling with static as she transmitted her final message. "I understand now. The swarm was never meant to be unstoppable. It was designed to be defeated by a species capable of both individual sacrifice and collective unity." She looked at the disruption protocol generator in her ship. It wasn't really a weapon at all. It was a key, designed by the Vorthok to unlock the prison they had accidentally created. The disruption protocol doesn't destroy, she continued. Her ship now just meters away from the core. It frees. It breaks the chains that bind consciousness to the collective. Every person who died fighting the swarm, every sacrifice made to protect others, it was all leading to this moment. Admiral Park Jisoo watched from the command bridge of her flagship, her heart pounding as she listened to Yuna's transmission. Around her, the entire human fleet had gone silent, everyone holding their breath. Yuna Jisoo said quietly into her communicator, "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." "No," Yuna replied, and there was peace in her voice. "This is why I became a scientist. To discover the truth and to use it to help others. The Vorthok designed their weapon to be stopped by people like us, people who choose to sacrifice for the greater good, but who also work together as one." Her ship touched the surface of the crystal prison, and the disruption protocol activated. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded outward from the core, washing over the entire swarm mass. But this wasn't destructive light. It was liberating. Every creature touched by it suddenly straightened up, movements becoming coordinated and purposeful instead of driven by hunger. The swarm began to dissolve, but not into destruction. Instead, it was transforming. The creatures that had been mindless eating machines were becoming individuals again, remembering who they had been before they were consumed. The prison that had held the Vorthok consciousness for millennia finally cracked open. "Thank you," came a voice that seemed to speak directly into the minds of every human in the fleet. "Thank you for freeing us from what we had become, the remaining swarm entities, now truly free for the first time in their existence, scattered across the galaxy. Some chose to remain near human space, offering their knowledge and friendship. Others departed for distant stars, seeking new purposes among the cosmos. The Vorthok consciousness, ancient and wise, spoke one final time before departing for parts unknown. You have shown us that the greatest weapon against darkness is not force, but the willingness to sacrifice for others, while standing together as one. The galaxy will remember this day." And with that, the nightmare was over. 6 months after the battle that saved the galaxy, Ambassador Kim Min-ho walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council Station once again. But this time, everything was different. He wasn't alone, begging for help that would never come. This time, he was surrounded by allies. To his right walked an awakened entity that had once been part of the Void Swarm. It had chosen to keep a form that looked partly human, partly something else entirely. A living symbol of transformation and choice? To his left, a representative of the ancient Vorthok civilization moved with the grace of beings who had seen the rise and fall of empires. Behind them came delegations from worlds that had never been part of the Galactic Alliance, species that had been ignored, abandoned, or written off as unimportant. They all walked together now, united by something the galaxy had never seen before. The council chambers looked exactly the same as they had 6 months ago. Yet the atmosphere was completely different. The alien representatives who had once dismissed humanity now watched nervously as Minho's group took their places. Some of the council members couldn't even look directly at the humans. Council mediator Zarian, a being made of shifting light patterns, spoke in the formal tone that had once intimidated Minho. The Galactic Alliance offers humanity immediate readmission with full voting rights and access to all Alliance technologies and trade networks. We also offer formal apologies for our previous ... oversight. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Every being in the chamber was waiting for Minho's response. "No," Minho said simply. His voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "The galaxy turned its back on us when we needed help. You called us expendable. You watched us prepare to die alone and did nothing." Zirian's light patterns flickered with what might have been nervousness. "Ambassador Minho, surely you understand that the situation has changed. What humanity accomplished, stopping the Void Swarm, has proven your species' value to the galaxy. Our value? Admiral Park Jizu stepped forward, her military uniform, bearing new insignia that the Council had never seen before. We don't need you to tell us our value. We learned it when we stood alone against the darkness. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with each council member. We're establishing the Free Worlds Coalition. Any species, any world abandoned by the galaxy, will find sanctuary with us. We'll never turn our backs on those who need help. The impact of her words was immediate. Several council members began speaking at once, their voices overlapping in a chaos of different languages and translation protocols. The idea of a rival organization to the Galactic Alliance was unthinkable. You cannot be serious, rumbled the Stonewalker representative. The Alliance has maintained peace for thousands of years. Peace for who? Asked the awakened entity, its voice carrying harmonics that made everyone in the chamber pause. Peace for the powerful while the weak are left to suffer? We have seen what real unity looks like. We have experienced what it means to sacrifice for others. What happened next shocked the galaxy. News of the Free Worlds Coalition spread like wildfire across the communication networks. Within weeks, 17 different worlds had overthrown. Their governments, inspired by humanity's example of standing together against impossible odds, species that had been oppressed for generations suddenly found the courage to demand better treatment. The awakened, using their unique perspective as beings who had been both destroyer and protector, established diplomatic relations with dozens of worlds. They shared technology that the Galactic Alliance had hoarded for centuries, and philosophical insights that came from their experience of transformation. Former enemies became allies. The Crystalline Collective, who had once ignored humanity's pleas, sent secret messages offering to join the coalition. Even some members of the Galactic Council began to question whether they had chosen the right side. The council chambers fell silent once more. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of beings who had learned what it meant to stand together when the galaxy turned away. It was the silence of those who realized that true strength came not from power or technology, but from the willingness to help others, even when no one would help you. Ambassador. Kim Minho looked around the chamber one final time. The galaxy taught us that we were expendable, he said quietly. Now we'll teach the galaxy that no one is expendable. Not if we have anything to say about it. The age of the Free Worlds Coalition had begun,